Now, I began this preparing this presentation, stating one of the things that I intended to deal with, uh, and I use the phrase indicators of systemic institutional racism, or the presence, indicators of the presence of systemic institutional racism in modern times. But as I was preparing the video, going through the white supremacy, the black supremacy, the white supremacy, and all of that, um, I thought, well, maybe this focus on racism is not very productive in terms of racism being a cause of uh, many problems that present uh, in the Black community, socioeconomically, politically, justice wise. Maybe that is not the root cause in 2025. Uh, Certainly cannot anybody with any measure of integrity and honesty certainly cannot discard or ignore, deny that past racism certainly has some contribution to conditions, relative conditions of Blacks in America in 2025. But the question is, has enough time passed between the slavery and Jim Crow, where there was a active, open, intentional uh, attacks? Okay. And process of putting up obstacles, intentionally so as to prevent Blacks from having ample, sufficient access to resources and opportunity as much as their white neighbors. Whatever measure of racism exists in 2025, it comes nowhere near that which was present in 1925, and certainly not in recording end of slavery in 1865. So I thought I would, maybe I'll label it indicators of the presence of systemic institutional inequity uh, in these modern times. Because really that's the issue. And so here's the question then. Are there, are there systemic institutional factors within the white community that hinder uh, attainment of equity for Blacks in a variety of life areas. Are there, secondly, are there systemic institutional factors within the Black community that hinder our attainment of greater equity in a variety of life areas? Thirdly, are there systemic institutional factors within both the white and Black communities that hinder uh, Blacks' attainment of equity in a variety of life areas? For me, the answer is clearly number three. There are systemic institutional factors within both the white and Black community that tends to uh, hinder uh, closing the gaps in a variety of areas of concern. And I don't think I'm beginning to uh, understand that claiming racism is the major problem of today is not very productive. It's more antagonistic, it's more harm than help. Now, such a claim in 1925, 1960, perhaps even 1970 would have been a very valid claim. I'm convinced of that. But I'm not convinced. I graduated high school in 1974. I'm not convinced racism since that point has been the major problem for Blacks in America. I'm not going to even deny that, past large scale racism, there are some lingering effects of that, and it does contribute uh, to those presence of those factors within the white community and within the Black community, both in terms of how people think about other races and why people sometimes do what they do towards other races. So I'm not going to deny his contribution, but I'm pretty much convinced that it's not the major factor. Racism is not the major problem that, you know, or the reason that inequities yet exists. There are some other factors that, although they may have some underlying relationship to racism, but they're not that racism is not that strong of a contribution. And so I think maybe sometimes racism becomes an excuse. Uh, and I don't, maybe shouldn't say that, but uh, Uh, but I just don't think it's the major problem of today. That's just my thought. Now, I graduated high school in 1974, so I kind of measure time from that point in terms of racism. And that was 10 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 9 years after the Voting Rights Act, 1965. And so I look at it like, well, from 64 to 74, it's kind of working out the wrinkles. And so by the time 74 comes along, things were pretty much settled. You know, the nation had pretty much accepted the fact that things were not going to be like they were before. You know, blacks now was going to be accepted, and everybody just got to get in line. Got to change whatever thoughts you have negative towards blacks. Blacks need to change whatever thoughts they have negative towards whites. Right? We need to begin to work together to make things better for everybody. Right? So I kind of measure that from 1974. Not saying there were not still, some learning that needed to go on. I remember I first went in the military in 1974. We used to have classes and used to meet together to talk about racism, you know, and it's been so long ago, But over time, they got rid of those things because what? I mean, we should have known. I mean, everybody knew by then. So you either got in line or you got sent out the military. Acted real bad, right? No, not saying that there weren't any issues over my 20 years. I can only think of one, but I think sometimes it's a matter of types of people you're around too. And I was around pretty solid folks, white and black. So, for the kind of work, kind of job I had, right? So, but other people, I understand. I understand how their life is like that. It depends on the caliber of people you're around sometimes, right? But this life matters. Uh, and so, um, you know, and so what I want, I just want to, I just kind of want to, I'm just thinking, I'm not an expert on this. This is not I didn't go to school for this. I didn't study this stuff, right? So it's kind of self-taught, just by reading and observing and thinking about my own life, you know. Now, I don't deny racism because in 2014, I bought a car. It wasn't in my hometown. I was temporarily someplace else. I won't name the city. But I bought a car while I was there. Another car went bad on me. And, went through the process. And it was kind of a downtime in my life. And uh, but I bought a car. Uh, it was a 2013 car, bought in 2014. So, you know, no big deal. Well, a couple years later, so I got a letter in the mail from Consumer Protection Financial Bureau or something like that, Washington, D.C., part of the government, federal government. Got a letter in the mail. I didn't expect it, you know. Well, come to find out, again, this is 2014, not 1914, not 1814, right? 2014. So, come to find out, I'll just say the system had been caught charging blacks and Hispanics a higher interest rate than white with comparable credit ratings. Let me say it again. 2014, quote, the system had been caught charging blacks and Hispanics a higher interest rate on a car loan than whites with similar credit rating. And so I got a refund my interest payment. Yeah. So I don't deny the presence of racism in America. And I would not be so foolish so as to think that was the only time that has happened to anybody in America in recent years. So I'm sure there were other instances throughout the nation where stuff like that goes on. But I am convinced, however, that it does go on much less than it used to go. I'm not saying that it's not impactful on some people's lives. It didn't bother me all that much, but having to make those higher payments. But some young 19, 20-year-old with a family, it may have bothered them. It may have hurt them, harmed them in a major way. The kids might have to go without some new shoes, or they might have missed their rent or whatever, you know. So I do not deny the impact that racism can have on people's lives today. Very negative impact, short term and long term, right? So I deny that, but I don't believe that it goes on nearly as much as um, it used to, and I don't believe that it is so bad that we should not be able to overcome it more than we are as a group.